28th, 2023 meeting of the Salem Planning Commission. Shall we please call the roll? Will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Augustine.
Here.
Commissioner Ekus.
Here.
Commissioner Fott.
Here.
Commissioner Goebel.
Here.
Commissioner Griggs.
Here.
Commissioner Heller is absent. Commissioner Levin.
Here.
And Commissioner Slater.
Here.
And Commissioner Vieira-Brandal.
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you, Shelby. Item 3, public comment. We don't have anybody here from the public to comment, so we'll move on to the consent calendar. Item 4.1. Commissioner Goebel, do you have a motion?
I would like to move to approve the minutes from our February 14th, 2023 meeting.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second by Levin.
Thank you, Commissioner Levin. Discussion on the motion? Shelby, will you please call the roll and signify by saying aye if you're in favor of the motion, nay if you're opposed.
Commissioner Augustine.
Aye.
Commissioner Ekus.
Aye.
Commissioner Fott.
Abstain.
Commissioner Goebel.
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs.
Aye.
Commissioner Levin.
Aye.
Commissioner Slater.
Aye.
And Commissioner Vieira-Brandal.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. Thanks for noting the abstention. Action item 4.3, we don't have any. Moving on to item 4.21, the sign code amendment resolution. And we will be looking for a motion on this after you talk about it.
Lydia's type, Aaron's gonna talk about it. I got it here.
Good evening, planning commissioners. My name is Aaron Franco, Planning Division. I don't have any presentation here for the resolution. We're asking that you initiate it. Recall, most of you were here last year when we began our series of work sessions on the site for an update. It's still a product on our list here, and hopefully it's a priority here in the near future. We'll be back to you guys with a staff report and a draft site code.
That's great. Commissioner Levin, do you have a motion on that for us?
Yes, I would make a motion that we approve and initiate the amendment process for resolution 23-01.
Thank you, Commissioner Levin. Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Goebel is my second. Thank you. Discussion on the motion? Shelby, will you please call the roll, signify by saying aye if you're in favor of the motion, nay if you're opposed.
Commissioner Augustine.
Aye.
Commissioner Ekus.
Aye.
Commissioner Fott.
Aye.
Commissioner Goebel.
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs.
Aye.
Commissioner Levin.
Aye.
Commissioner Slater.
Aye.
And Commissioner Vieira-Brandal.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Moving now to 5.1, public hearings on case CPC NPC ZC 22-07. Before I get to the next two steps, are there any ex parte discussions to disclose or potential conflicts? Commissioner Levin.
No conflict, ex parte contact. I have to know the bank manager at what was Farm Credit, now Northwest Farm Credit. It was mentioned to me before the meeting that they were going for an application. It was a statement of fact in that conversation.
Thank you for the record. Any other comments? Shelby, would you please read the statement criteria before we turn it over to Lydia?
This is a public hearing to consider a comprehensive plan change, neighborhood plan change, and zone change, case number CPC NPC ZC 22-07 for a property located at 380 Farm Credit Drive Southeast. The criteria applicable to this application are found in the Salem Revised Code, SRC, chapters 64.025E2 for comprehensive plan map amendments, and 265.005E1 for quasi-judicial zone changes. Failure to raise an issue prior to the close of the public hearing with statements or evidence sufficient to afford the Planning Commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals, LUBA, on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues relating to proposed conditions of approval precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the conclusion of the hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence or testimony. The Planning Commission will then either continue the public hearing or leave the record open for at least 7 days.
Thank you, Shelby. Great job. Olivia, it's yours.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Olivia Diaz. I'm the current planning manager with the planning division. We are here for CPC ZC 2207 at 380 Farm Credit Drive. I would like to enter the staff report in this presentation into the record. So the subject property is located on Hawthorne Avenue, just east of Hawthorne Avenue, south of State and north of San Antonio Highway. That's a large 10-acre parcel. The current comprehensive plan map is industrial. It's shown in gray. You can see industrial commercial shown in purple to the west of the property. The current zoning is IP industrial park, shown in what looks like white on the screen. Again, across Hawthorne to the east is IC, industrial commercial zoning, and a little bit of IBC, which is industrial business center. Screen otherwise. Here's an aerial photo of the subject property. The subject property has gone through a site plan review to construct the Farm Credit headquarters building. They have also applied for a partition to partition the property, which has not yet been platted. The street that's going through there is a public street that will be dedicated on the platting of the parcels. So we received no comments on this application. All the property is not in a homeowners association. As you noted in the staff report, Cessna was contacted by the applicant and by staff. No comments were provided from fire or building and safety. Public Works memo is attached in your staff report. There is a recommended conditional approval for a trip cap based on the existing zoning. Factors evaluated on pages 7 and pages 15, starting with the decision criteria. Properties in the area are also been zoned industrial commercial. This will provide for a larger industrial and commercial variety in the area, which would be equally or better to the existing IP zone. And again, there was a trip cap based off the existing IP zoning. Staff's recommendation is to approve the comprehensive plan map amendment from industrial to industrial commercial and approve the zone change from industrial park to industrial commercial, subject to the one condition outlined in the staff report. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Olivia. Questions from commissioners? Commissioner Bobo.
Yeah, just a quick question. I was wondering if you can explain how the whether UGA is required. So in this case, it wasn't required because adequate utilities are available. Can you explain how that's determined?
Public Works reviews that as part of the application process, and usually it will come with development also, but there's adequate facilities in Hawthorne, so the development has preceded the USA, the urban service area. And so there's already people who put in those facilities, and the facilities, all the linking facilities are there for the development, so UGA wasn't required.
Thank you.
Additional questions?
I had an easy one. So I did notice the agenda for the neighborhood association meeting, they were referenced on that. Was the feedback, and I can ask the applicant when he's up, if that's a better situation, but
I'm
I
sure the
didn't see
applicant
anything
can
in
answer that better. I didn't see
anything.
any negative or positive feedback in the minutes that I read.
Yes. And then the other second last question I had was on page 13 of the staff report. And then you're talking about the housing needs analysis. And it says that the adoption of our Salem comprehensive plan update rectified the deficit in multifamily. Didn't address it, it didn't solve it, didn't like that. We need more multifamily land.
You go for it, Lisa.
We don't have a problem anymore.
No, we redesignated more than was needed in the study. So we need the units, but we have to like do that.
Okay. The supply. Okay. Those are my questions. Any other questions from Commissioner Akis?
Not really. A question, just maybe some additional background that I've forgotten. She made a statement in here that there was a conclusion that Salem needs for, concluded that we had enough industrial land, but we projected a commercial land shortage. Can you give me some background?
I believe that that might have been, from how we've reviewed it in the past. Our Salem rectified all of that, so.
For the record, no, we have a projected deficit of commercial land. We're not required to provide additional commercial land under state law like they're looking for housing. So we don't have to rectify that. We do have policies around preserving industrial land. When we did that study in 2015, it looked at how land was being used at the time for commercial. We've seen a lot more infill since then. So I think if we were to redo that study, it maybe wouldn't have the same projected deficit because we've seen a lot of commercial development happen on land that was considered developed, but was like a parking lot, for example. Also, just the commercial landscape has changed since 2015 with people shopping online more, et cetera. So there's a lot of factors that go into determining what kind of commercial land we thought we needed at the time, that went into a projected deficit.
So this conclusion was from 2014, 2015.
It's from our adopted economic opportunities analysis, which was done in 2015, and we got somewhere into 2035.
And the current.
We've not done that study since then, so.
Right, but it's, you're saying that it's no longer really accurate. So we don't have the short.
I'm saying it's based on data from the 10 years before 2015 and the market at the time and our population projection. And I'm also saying we're not required to address that deficit. So when cities do a study like that, it's often the basis to ask to, for example, expand the urban growth boundary. So the city could say, well, we don't have enough commercial land, we want to expand the urban growth boundary. The answer to that is probably no. Land can be more efficient. We have prime farmland. Maybe for industrial land, then it would be like, yes, we could expand the urban growth boundary.
I mean, unintentionally open up a black hole. But so there seems to be a difference between having a deficit and whether we're required to address the deficit.
We have a projected deficit.
We do
Yes.
have a projected deficit of commercial.
Yes,
Okay.
but we're not required to address it. But they're asking to go to a zone that allows industrial and commercial. And coming from the zone that mostly just allows industrial.
Yeah, so this would help us. I mean, the current report is basically saying this. It's one of the benefits of making the change. Yeah.
Congratulations. Other questions from the commissioner? Commissioner Floyd.
In general, can you tell me what percentage of the total land that's in this zone would have to be built on? So is there like a minimum building footprint requirement?
There's not a minimum of.
So unlike the housing or commercial, where we might have a minimum percentage covered, that's not the case.
There's a maximum lot coverage, which is pretty high for the zone, being commercial, but generally they never reach that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? We'll have another opportunity. Ask questions, come up. Thank you, Olivia. Would the applicant like to come up and address the question? And as a reminder, you have 15 minutes, and if you could state your name and address for the record, that would be wonderful.
Good evening, Planning Commission. My name is Steve Kay with Cascadia Planning and Development Services, and I'm representing the applicant tonight. For the record, my address is PO Box 1920, Silverton, Oregon 97381. So for those of you that are familiar with this area of town, you'll know that the site is located where there's already somewhat of a mix of commercial and industrial uses. To the north, south, and west, there's industrial designated properties, and those are currently developed with Kettle Foods, Wells Fargo Customer Service Center, the Board of Massage Therapists, and the Oregon Park Center. And then to the east, there's businesses such as restaurants and some hotels and financial services and some office buildings. The proposed industrial commercial designation is compatible with the surrounding land uses and will help address, as was mentioned earlier, the need for some additional commercial land supply. There's permitted uses in the industrial commercial zone, which would be beneficial for this area, including eating and drinking establishments, retail sales, personal services, financial services, commercial entertainment, medical services, and civic services. And all of these are somewhat limited or non-permitted uses in this existing industrial park zone. The type of uses do complement the existing development pattern and help provide those needed services for employees at industrial businesses in this area. We feel that the staff report, as well as the applicant's materials that were submitted, address how this application meets applicable rules and policies of the comprehensive plan, the state transportation plan rule requirements, and the city's development code standards. So with that, we thank you for your consideration this evening, and I'll be available to answer questions.
Okay, questions of the applicant? So was there any feedback at the neighborhood association? As you can tell, we take their comments pretty seriously.
There was just some interested questions on what might happen with the property, what type of businesses, but there's no development plans at this point. It's just the subdivision and the dedication of that public road. That's all.
And you're just north of the new treasury building.
Yes.
Yeah. That's okay. Questions for the applicants? Wow, you're getting on very easy. Thank you for your testimony. And we don't have anybody else that signed up to testify. Any additional questions of staff? Would anybody like to extend this hearing to a later date? And anybody who's testified, which is you, the applicant, I can't imagine that we want to do that, but I'm asking. Perfect. I'm going to close the hearing. Commissioner Levin, I need a motion, please.
Make a motion that we approve case number CPC MPC ZC 22-07.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second, congratulate Commissioner Levin for getting through the numbers and the letters.
He's pretty good at that. Thank you for the second. Commissioner Ekus, discussion on the motion. I think the staff report is very clear and to the point. I don't have any issues. It's exciting to see. That's a great area of town that's developing, I think, in an industrial commercial way. And if you haven't been by the treasury, it has nothing to do with this case. I would suggest you go visit. It's pretty wonderful, as I'm sure the building will be. No other comments for the case to consider. Shelby, will you please call the roll, signify by saying aye if you're in favor of the motions, nay if you're opposed.
Commissioner Augustine?
Aye.
Commissioner Ekus?
Aye.
Commissioner Vogel?
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs?
Aye.
Commissioner Fott?
Aye.
Commissioner Levin?
Aye.
Commissioner Slater?
Aye.
And Commissioner Vieira Brandel?
Aye.
Motion passed. Thank you, Shelby. It's probably because I had my mic on. But I need to do that. Information reports, we don't have any. No other public figure to talk to us. Planning and administrative report, please.
Let's see, we don't have any, we don't have a meeting on March 7th. We don't have the items yet for March 21st. We are planning to bring the sign code amendment back on the 18th of April since we approved our resolution. That'll give us time to provide state notice, public notice, and get that scheduled for a hearing. We had that public meeting for our walkable mixed use areas last Thursday at noon, that Julie and Candace mentioned. Yeah, I can't remember if any of you logged on. There was like 70 people, so, and it had the flu, so, and I moderated, so God knows, I didn't pay that much attention to who was there, but there were about 70 people, and it went for like an hour and a half, and I can send out the link if you want to watch it. It was on Zoom. And so it was an overview for DLCD about what is content rulemaking, and then what is the city doing. It was a joint meeting with Kaiser, so Kaiser planning staff and they're talking about what they're doing and how we're working together on it. And it was pretty well received from the folks that were there. So that was exciting. Otherwise, we just, I'm trying to think of any specific outreach events like, I don't think so. Julie meetings, we're gonna be out and about. We have one of our new planners here in the background, watching the meetings. Abigail Edison, say hi. She's one of our planner ones. A couple new staff that you guys have not met on Zoom or here. Fred is here, his first in-person meeting in here in the chambers with us.
And he happens to be from North Carolina too, which is very exciting.
Oh, that's so exciting. And last night, if you didn't see it, City Council, they voted to bring paid parking downtown, so that's gonna be a hot topic coming up. So if you didn't see that, there's a motion from the mayor, which is, I would say, it's a planner, exciting, exciting just to manage the parking differently, use the money. And there are now security guards at the garages downtown, 24 hours a day, and the second one on weekends, which is good. And then I think they're going to ramp that up and get some more money. So I know that's been a constant concern. You know, people that park in the garages downtown, security, people breaking in that kind of stuff. I think that's all I have to share. Oh, I did get you all on the list with the housing data. So one went out yesterday of a spreadsheet, and we talked about that before. Which is good because I was like, oh, it's in January's numbers, and she did it instantly and sent it to you guys. So it's kind of a complicated, very dense spreadsheet, but it's interesting that it goes back pretty far. And so you can compare the single family dwelling permits, you know, over the last 10 years and that kind of stuff. If you're interested in that kind of data. So.
Speaking of, any more, because we can move right into comments for the good of the order. And I think what I noticed on that spreadsheet, and it's good to, I had not interpreted that we had addressed, rectified the available land for multifamily housing. But then looking at those numbers, the units are really going up. I mean, compared to, I think what I wrote down in 2021, it was 414. This year already we're at 549 units for multifamily. So there's a good trend there. It's reassuring to see. I think Commissioner Levin was there and Commissioner Clark was at that economic development meeting yesterday morning that SVN puts on. It's a lot of good information, not only on single family housing challenges, multifamily, industrial, commercial, agriculture, yeah. So it's a good panel for a good amount of time, but it was all good information. Other comments for the good of the order? Commissioner Holman.
Thank you. My question ties actually both into that both discussions about the walkable series, which I did attend that conversation was really interesting, and then also when we're talking about buildable land for residential needs. And I was thinking about this, and this wasn't a question that I had really thought too much of during the meeting, but after that, I wanted to bring it up and sort of a conversation about how the new climate friendly equitable communities rulemaking is and our walkable mixed-use areas is going to impact so for example, new annexations of zone changes, proposing residential land is so I guess the first part of my question is going to be how will the city now see that as our residential land needs are met, we're no longer going to accept a residential land for new zoning, and then follow up to that would be what is the city's, or have there been conversations about how that would impact housing affordability and availability?
Yeah, those are good questions. People ask me that a lot. You know, does that mean the city's not going to approve the zone change to multifamily anymore? And I say, well, that's up to the planning commission. No, I think though it's been really easy to bring a recommendation for approval for a really long time because we've had the housing needs analysis and we just know we need more land, right? So it's been really hard to ever recommend denial or for the commission really to ever deny a comprehensive zone change. So I think, you know, we're gonna be able to still support them, but have to be more like, is this really the right location? Are you picking the right density of multifamily land, right? Instead of just before was always the highest density is the best because we get the most units. Maybe that's not the best for compatibility. Because we can't assume that all the land that we rezone will build, people will redevelop it in 20 years, right? So we still need to try to get the units. And so if we have somebody, they have property and wanting to build multifamily, and that's known, then what we should be wanting to support, right? Then instead of like, but we rezoned 300 acres in West Salem, that'll be multifamily someday, right? But really, that's something the planning commission will have to grapple with when the zone change comes your way. So it's a great question. And I do remember now that you were there, because I think you put a question in the chat. I ran out of questions. Did you put a question in the chat? I think you did. Yeah.
Did you have a?
Yeah, the second part to my question is, have there been like conversations around how that might impact housing affordability generally?
Not specifically. I think, you know, it was a lot when we were doing our Salem because making sure we have the land available is the first step. I think housing and how the city is going to address housing, is all going to change drastically. Depending on what happens in this legislative session, there's so many bills on housing. The governor, has done an executive order, the new governor, another executive order, and there's going to be an Oregon housing needs analysis statewide, and it's going to break it down by region, and it's going to give us housing units that we're trying to produce every year. And so that's kind of interesting. And as the way that I understand the bill to be written right now, if the city doesn't produce those units, then the state can come in and look at our processes and why is it not happening. Obviously, there's some pushback from cities because cities don't build housing, so that's kind of weird. Like when it comes out for applications, and why are we planning to have? But I think there's always barriers that cities, could remove to housing. And then we are kicking off our housing production strategy, or we plan to this summer. It's in our budget to be funded, so I believe the council will fund that. And that's a next step under state law. Once you do your housing needs analysis, you rezone the land, now we have to do the production strategy. And so we're required to look at a bunch of, there's like hundreds of strategies that the state's identified that cities can do to incentivize housing. And so that's looking at every financial tool that we have, and like, are we utilizing it in the best way? Are there other ones available to us under state law that we haven't done, like a construction excise tax, for example, which Salem doesn't do? And then are there barriers in our codes? We have to look at our code and our processes and standards again to see if there's other things that we can remove. So I think that's where we're going to be looking at affordability, less on like the land supply side. And then also we did, besides the multifamily land, we did zone hundreds of acres to mixed use. To zones that allow housing out right now that didn't before. So we are seeing some of those lands already coming in permits for exclusively residential, which is great, but like also everyone wants some services with our housing. So, but we purposely didn't require a mix of uses, right? When it is flexible as possible, but already some angst amongst the staff about we do the right things. It's all going to be apartments that, because we also have goals about walkability and services and that kind of stuff. So, more to come.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you.
So when we designated land for multifamily, obviously got to apply for that. Is it buildable?
Oh yeah, I mean, all land in Salem is buildable in some way. I mean, there's development constraints that can be slopes, riparian, archaeological site or something like that they would go through. And obviously, some have utilities where some don't, and are cheaper and that kind of thing to serve. But generally, no, we didn't go site by site and then pull out like every section that was like, oh, this is too steep for this, and something like that. But we did also redesignate more than our minimum for need to kind of balance that.
It's your fault.
Thank you. I was curious if with the housing production strategic planning, are you going to be looking at the infrastructure elements and those services as a corollary to it? I ask because it does concern me a little bit when we push for housing just broadly without considering the ramifications of isolated housing and moving it into areas that ultimately can perpetuate a cycle of not reaching home ownership, for example.
Yeah, I don't know that through the strategy we're looking more at financial, financial and code barriers. We did have that angst in our Salem because the land that we rezoned to multifamily is by and large at the edge of the UGB, because that's where there's vacant land. And that's what we had to do to meet state law. Ideally, we would want more of our multifamily in our major corridors, and so, one of the things we did is we upped the height along the major corridors, and we said if you're adding housing, you don't need parking for any of the uses on the site. And we're like, look at us with that great incentive, and like less than a year later, it's like, well, no parking anywhere for anybody, right? So that incentive just went away. So we're gonna have to try to look at other things, and since financial resources would be something that we could look at. And some of those are really tied to geographic areas, right, downtown or other urban areas, but I think there are some that aren't necessarily tied to that, so maybe that's a way the city could try to focus that. We won't be able to stop housing from going in those other places, but could we try to concentrate where we want.
Thank you. This discussion gets me back to the neighborhood hubs. And trying to avoid the situation we were in before, where we didn't do any kind of neighborhood hubs, and we had these large developments, or we had residential areas all developed, and we decided, okay, neighborhood hubs are a good idea, so the first thing I try is fit them into an existing neighborhood. And it didn't really fit in some of them. The ones that were proposed, which were basically on the basis of somebody volunteering that they might use their property for their, as a neighborhood hub, but the neighborhood didn't particularly want it there or at those locations. And I'm particularly worried that we end up making that same mistake where we got the idea of the hubs and the services. I think we heard from maybe at the last meeting about the younger generation wanting services in their wanting neighborhoods that are not walkable, have services. And so I do get a little concerned that we have all this development for housing, but we don't really have any way to assure that we're going to get the kinds of services that we hope would be there with the neighborhood hub idea. So that we get back to the same thing. Instead of fitting it in at the start, we try to fit it into some existing or established neighborhood. I'm not sure how we do that, but that's one of the concerns I have, is that we have a nice policy and a nice intent, but I'm not sure how we go about other than, I'm not sure what leverage we have on any particular development to say, think about this or work this in.
Well, we are requiring them now in subdivisions that are 5 acres or larger. So we haven't got any 5 acres or larger yet, so it's only been 6 months. So that is our leverage. They don't have to put it in business, but they do have to designate the hub, and in the subdivision. So I think that's what we have. That's about what we can do. It's also snowing very heavily outside. I don't know if you can see, so I just want to alert the commission to the fact that it's kind of like a blizzard outside right now. Yay, it's great.
You're just trying to get them.
Some people live in this room don't live in Salem and they're going elsewhere.
So any other comments for the good of the order? Commissioner Levin?
In regards to Commissioner Nikas's comments about concerns that maybe the adjustments to the code don't put enough obligation on developers to ensure that there is a neighborhood hub. I would say in contradiction to that line of thought, that the code and city leadership should never be in the business of development. And so trying to steer or ensure some kind of development from the planning commission or from city council has always failed. And so focusing on policy and an idea and creating a conversation, I think naturally developers will adjust to that, but trying to force that has not, I think, served Salem well when Salem has arbitrarily tried to go and force redevelopment by rezoning something that the city council thought was a good idea. And there's some land north of downtown that's very well known historically that city council had a great idea. They thought they could steer or force development to happen, and it didn't stagnate instead. So it's always it is even the zone change that we approved today, there always is a potential and unforeseen backlash in something as simple as even a zone change. So I appreciate the language that was used and the incentives that were placed on the developments as a part of the whole Our Salem project and the auxiliary projects that have kind of come along related to that have adjusted some of the code. And I think that we will have to wait several years because just like cities move, developers have to take in and adjust and relook at how they plan development. So the fact that city staff can say, but your development is larger than 5 acres, so we can obligate you in this instance, will in a very, I think, neutral way, very evenly handed, do any steering that potentially should happen from the city level. So I think the approach in trying to create a better policy, a better scripted code, better worded zoning, I'm really excited about what came out of the Our Salem project, especially because of how much city involvement was put into that to get that public input on stuff. It is unfortunate that a lot of the public input about the neighborhood hubs for favorite place was so negative. One of them was on a friend's property, and he was actually pretty optimistic about what it would do long term. But he had just built a brand new home, so it wasn't like it was ever going to become a hub in the next 30 years. So I like the language that was picked, and I'm optimistic that we will start to see developers naturally gravitate towards the hub because of the market demand. And that's something that's never planned into development code, but market demanded if the market speaks for something. So we made a parking requirement for apartments, and an apartment developer came into Salem and said, I'll take that risk and put 143 units in downtown.
Get to committees for next, but I just wanted one comment yesterday, the economic summit forum. They were identifying at the summit yesterday the attributes of some of these new multifamily housing areas, and one is that they recommended a dog washing station. So that's kind of a trend. So people want dog washing stations. They want these services local. So I think that's also to your point, Commissioner, because you've got the mic.
Thank you. At the risk of the snow building up and having trouble getting up my hill, I do feel like I need to comment that I do believe my expression of concern that we do not find ourselves in a position like before was a little mischaracterized by Commissioner Levin as trying to force some things, and I do hope that his belief that developers will actually start doing it on their own because the market demands it is the way to go. And that would be good. I just think that we need to be cognizant and see whether or not we are getting what we hope we're getting. I do believe that the policy of the larger developments having to set aside is a good one.
Yeah.
And as far as forcing development, that's basically what our zones do in the first place. They describe there's a certain degree of force by any zone development. So I just think with all due respect, the commissioner, I was not talking about trying to force or introduce anything newer than what we already have. It's simply an expression of a concern, and I hope his belief in the market taking care of it because the market demands it actually comes to pass.
Yeah, and I think what I heard from both of you is that when we make these changes, policies or whatever, it's unchanged, we don't really know what the end result will be. unintended consequences, if any, are going to be, but, it's a step to take. That's what we're here for. Commissioner Slager.
Thank you. Setting aside the issue of zoning and policy, my concern on all of this is that our current planning and market reliant system is not leading to change fast enough. The tempo at which we decide to do something, that we plan to do something, that we construct something is long here. And I mean, that's just typical of any place, it's not just Salem. And I think it's a tempo that is not going to meet our needs over even a short period of time. And we need to find out how to be more proactive in trying to spur development. I'm not suggesting steering, but I think that we need to be considering things like, how do we master plan Lancaster and commercial? How do we look at all our warehouse and empty retail areas and figure out how to incentivize housing on that? I just read a very good report in Boston where they did an assessment on the ability to turn all of their vacant commercial or underutilized commercial land into housing. And identified, billions of dollars of possible housing options there. And you do a very good job, I think, downtown in trying to broker development in downtown through purchasing and packaging customers with buildings. I think we need to be doing a lot more of that in Salem if we're going to meet our goals. Just putting together a policy that we hope the market will implement in 5 to 10 years, and that's how we're going to get change. Is just not going to get us to where we need to be, I believe.
Thank you, Commissioner Slater. Any other comments, Commissioner Noble?
I'm not ready to leave yet. I wanted to go back and actually make a comment about the public production strategy with, just because, and I mean, it might be a little while for you guys to meet again, but with that process coming up, I want to go back to something that Commissioner Fox said that I really would love to see kind of just taking more of a critical conversation on in this process, and that is affordable home ownership. And I think it's something that's maybe been a little bit pushed to the wayside in a lot of these conversations. And I know that when we talk about housing affordability, like there's the need for housing and there's the need for, like, when we talked, especially at the walkable mixed-use areas discussion, there was some conversation around like generational wealth and being able to have housing that and home ownership and the importance of that. And then there wasn't really any connection between that and the actual strategies and policies. And so I want to just go back to that and first, I think my perception of housing affordability and affordable home ownership has changed since I've started working sort of in the development arena in a major way. That it has is that I've realized how much of the cost of housing production is wrapped up in infrastructure and like making a lot buildable through like the utilities and SCC's permitting, like all of the engineering, architecture, like all those fees that go into just making a single lot buildable. And that's like, I think a lot of the reasons why, a lot of developers are tending towards, building $600,000 subdivisions where there's not any entry level housing. I know a lot of people are like really frustrated that like the cheapest house you can find in Salem is $400,000. And I think that when, from the perspective of the younger person, and as someone who's recently purchased a home through like a year ago, being able to, leverage, purchased a really inexpensive starter home in a rural community, sold it for a profit, and then we're able to actually purchase a nice home and nice community with our family. And that's something that's like not accessible to so many people. And like, I think that when we talk about affordable home ownership and we need to really think critically about how, if it costs $150,000 to make a single, quarter acre lot, like to put a house on it, that developer isn't going to want to build a 2-bedroom home that they can only sell for $50,000, and then that's a lot of the reason why I think a lot of developers, they're going to max out the top of the market before they move down to the next level. And I think that that's just a huge constraint that I think has gone unrecognized in some of these policy discussions to affordable home ownership and production of entry level starter homes for young families.
And one of the, I think, yes, Commissioner Levin is probably the only one on commission at the time when we had that community land trust case, which is a great concept. Northwest Dev is the one that was proposing it. And so the cost of home ownership is really the cost of the home and not the cost of the land, because a nonprofit enters into a long-term lease for a family or a unit that meets a certain economic standard. So they can actually purchase the home, not worry about the cost of the land, put, equity, build up equity in that home, then they can too sell it to another person and then build, but it's an entry into homeownership because you're taking out that really formidable cost of the land.
I think this is also a really good opportunity to talk about the middle housing, strata of housing production and creating essentially cottage clusters. And Salem actually has some fantastic examples of how this has been done decades ago.
50s.
Yeah, and they're great developments. They're small, very walkable, small starter homes that would be a really wonderful addition, I think, to increasing housing production without, the $400,000 price tag for a starter home, which most people cannot start with. So hopefully that's something that we'll see a lot more of come for us.
Other comments for the good of the order? Good discussion, and we'll be back about a month maybe. Did you want to say anything to the commission?
Certainly.
Okay, step on up.
Thank you.
Name and board or area of town.
Is that a podium? Hi, my name is Curtis Smith. I live in Ward 3. I was hearing a lot of this conversation about neighborhood hubs. I was really excited about that. But I think I kind of agree that neighborhood hubs, when they're forced, they are kind of doomed to fail. I think, especially if we're building something like, an apartment complex, forcing a neighborhood hub to that area, seems like it's not going to be a really great plan because if we look at somewhere like downtown, downtown works really well because it was incrementally developed over time. It wasn't a massive project, right? It wasn't somewhere where we said, hey, let's paint a circle. Here's where you can build all commercial, right? It's places that were built organically over time, not just one giant project. So I think that's something that's really, something we should probably look into. It's like, how can we allow homeowners to build commercial units on their properties that can adapt to the community and create kind of more organic, adaptable ecosystems rather than large complex machines that, when one actor leaves, the whole machine grinds to a halt. So that's why we have something like a strip mall that, adds decline to a neighborhood when actor leaves the strip mall, right? So I would be afraid that designating neighborhood hubs, I think it might end up leading to decline in a lot of these neighborhoods due to its being, forced into these areas rather than allowing it to be organically adapted to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions for Chris from the commissioners? Thanks for coming down again.
Thank you.
Our next meeting's canceled, so don't come. Seeing no other comments for the good of the order, we will adjourn.